Okay, welcome everyone to the TBD Pod. Today we have attorney Chris Waggener. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
I appreciate you being here. We're going to talk about your case specifically, which was a pedestrian. A pedestrian was struck while they were on vacation here at an intersection here in the Tampa Bay area. You were, sounds like, inspired by what happened to this poor family to kind of dig into more of the details about the overarching issues we have in our area and really American culture at large with this kind of car versus pedestrian issues. I mean, when people cross the street, sometimes cars are not looking for them for a multitude of reasons, but if the roads are not designed in such a way that allows for people to cross and people have to cross the road to go to work, to get where they need to be, what do you expect people to do? And so it's a shame that people have to risk their lives just to get to where they need to go. So you reached out to me, Chris, and I appreciate you doing that. But I think the best way for us to start is to really dig into this specific circumstance with this poor family that was hit by a vehicle. This was, and I'll let you go here in a second, Chris, but this was right over the Courtney Campbell Causeway on the Pinellas side, right when you get into Clearwater. It's kind of a messy area. You've got a ton of different thick multi-lane roadways, highways going over top. And then on top of that, huge retailers, right? Target, like these big box retailers, tons of traffic, people moving from A to B. Let's start with this case. This family comes to visit. Start from the beginning. How did you hear about it? And then who's the family?
Okay, so the way I heard about it was an attorney friend of mine out of Brevard, David Mann, got the case. And it's like, I'm originally from Brevard, it's like the East Coast side. And he calls me up and he was like, hey, I got this potential case, gave me kind of the basic facts of it. And I was just like, that sounds terrible. This was in November of 2019. So that's how I got the case. So I, set up a meeting to talk to him. And I mean, it's just we've been going, full tilt ever since then.
How many years in is this, Chris?
So this is, I guess we're almost 6 years now.
Wow.
So 5.5 years. Yeah. He was 16 at the time of the injury. And he's 21, 22 now. So this is him pre-accident. This is Giannikos, Maximus. We just call him Max. And these are pictures of him, except for the middle one, which is in Times Square there. That was taken the week before the crash happened. That was him in South Africa. He grew up just outside of Cape Town. And as you can tell, he's really into the beach, really into surfing. He's a self-taught surfer. He's a pretty incredible kid, man. I mean, he was a leader. He was in the center of the friends group. He was very helpful. If you could flip to the next picture, if you don't mind. Thanks. So like, this is his family. He, on the left there is his older sister, Anastasia. They used to call her Stussy for short. And she's got Downs. And so his mom there on his right, Roxanne, we used to rely on him to help take care of Stussy because she needs extra help. He was just a great kid, just like a shining star is the way that we think about him. Just a great kind of a rock star of a kid, right? He's self-taught surfing, became a surf instructor. He got so good. And then what happened is in the summer or something like that of 2017, if you could go back real quick, So, all right. So the lady in the middle there is Alexia, and that's her husband on the right, Tyrone. So Alexia, Max, and Stussy, they're all children of Roxanne there. What happened is the baby that she's holding there unfortunately passed away from leukemia. And these are some of the last photos that they got of them, before, that unfortunately happened. And as you can imagine, the family was devastated. So they were told by a counselor, hey, time to get a new start, get out of the country, clear your heads. And so what they did is in the summer of 2019, they took a trip. They had a family friend of theirs that was getting married in New York. So they flew over to New York, went to the wedding, and they drove down the eastern seaboard to come down to Clearwater because they wanted to go to the beach because they love the beach, as you can clearly see there. So, okay, now, if you don't mind, you go to the next one.
I don't think the surfing is as good as in Clearwater as it is in South
I know,
Africa.
that's what I've been giving Max a hard time about that for years, but they stopped by Daytona on the way over. But that's the draw, right? That's the draw of Clearwater. Like you get the blue water like that, like you just, and the white sands like that.
Exactly.
It's hard to find that anywhere else in the world. So they came on over here and, they stayed. So this is the intersection where the crash happened. So this is what you're looking at is a Google photo of Gulf to Bay Boulevard, which is 60. So, goes out to the Gulf on the left there, comes over from Tampa on the right there, and then you got US 19 in the middle there running north to south. It's a burly intersection. And they were staying at the hotel, or one of the hotels, on the top left corner there where the mouse cursor is, on the northwest corner of the intersection. So they get there and they check into their hotel room, and they're excited because they're on vacation and they've just got to their new destination, and they decide that they're going to play in the pool at the hotel room because it was like, I don't know, like early midday, like early afternoon, late morning. And they play in the pool for like 3 or 4 hours or whatever, right? Just hanging out, enjoying the sun, getting their legs underneath them. And they're going to go to the beach the next day. So what they decide is Max and Alexia and Tyrone. Alexia and Tyrone are like 23, 24 at the time of the collision. Max is like 16 years old, right? So they decide that down in the southeastern corner there, you can see down at the bottom there where it says like Indian Bistro, flooring showroom. That is the malls at Clearwater, and that's where the Costco is. So if you've been to Costco over in Pinellas County, then you know this area that I'm talking about. There's a Perkins just north of there, Mellow Mushroom. So they decide that it'd be fun for them to go walk down into the shopping center there and explore around, get some stuff for the beach the next day. Get some dinner, for the evening. So they leave. They come down. They're not on US 19. They're on the service road. They're the West Service Road there by the Holiday Inn. And they push the intersection button to go east across the north side of the intersection, right? So under US 19, okay? They push the buttons. Everything works fine. Go over to the next section. Same deal. They want to go south now because they're trying to get down into the stores there. And they push the button to go south down into the intersection. So they do that. It works fine. They go down into the stores there, and they're down there for like, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours, however long they're down there, because it's a pretty big area. And again, they're sightseeing.
Right.
To me and you, it may not seem like it, but to them, they're like, they saw mini golf, which they thought was cool.
It's their first time in America?
It was their first time in America. Yeah, it was. Mm-hmm. So, like they were looking at like I was just telling you this a few minutes ago. Like one of the things they were excited to see was a Dollar General, because they were like, a Dollar General, like everything in the store is $1. Like, you got to be kidding me, right? And they wanted to get Slurpees because they don't have Slurpees in South Africa. Yeah, exactly. So they're out there doing their thing. So anyway, they come back up the street because they're going back to their hotel, and they come up on the southeastern corner there. Now, if you look, you can see that there's like islands, like cement islands that are in each corner of the intersection. So you're navigating, in order to cross this intersection on foot as a pedestrian, you have to navigate to the island, across the service roads, across the frontage roads, and then you have to navigate 6 lanes of traffic to get to the next island. Okay? And so they get to the southwestern corner down there by that like lake area, and they push the button to go to the north side, and it doesn't change. Okay? So they sit there and they do that for a few minutes. It's not like they just sit there and they push it once and they're like, oh, it didn't change. Let's go across now. They pushed it multiple times. All 3 of them took turns pushing it multiple times. They waited there for a while. It didn't work. So then they pushed the button to go underneath US 19 to go to the east side to try to cross north there. So they do that and they go over there and they push those buttons, and it doesn't change. So they have said this, and they said this in trial when we were trying the case, that it was somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes. They were on the south side going back and forth trying to make it to the north side, and it doesn't change. So what then happens is that Tyrone starts looking at the lights, and Tyrone is a mechanic / engineer. He's mechanically inclined kind of guy. So he's looking at the lights. He's trying to time the lights, and that's difficult to do given the size and complexity of this intersection. But he does it, and he tries to do it. And at some point he says, all right, let's make the crossing, when all the lights were red and they started crossing. Now, David, if you don't mind, could you go, there's a video of the actual intersection. I have some drone footage of the intersection.
Slide 5, it looks like, David.
Yeah, slide 5. There we go. This one? That one. Yeah, you just play it. There's no sound or anything like that. So this is the side they were trying to cross on. So,
boy, look how daunting, it's like how many different sections of intersection, how many different lanes of travel? It is a very complicated intersection, to say the least.
So as they were crossing into the north side of the intersection there, you see the Walmart truck there?
Yep.
So those 2 lanes were blocked all the way down. So it obstructed their view. Now, obviously we have drone footage, so you've got like literally a bird's eye view of the intersection. But if you're on foot down in the intersection there, that Walmart truck is blocking all that traffic right there, right? You're not going to be able to see anything that's coming. So the point I'm trying to make is that they moved out into traffic. Those lanes were blocked. It's a busy day. It was rush hour traffic. I think it might have been Mother's Day or Labor Day. Anyway, they were crossing traffic, and Max just happened to be the one that stepped out past that second turn lane there.
Yep.
And a car hit him doing about 35, 40 miles an hour, and it launched him far enough that he fell underneath the actual US 19.
Wow. Oh my gosh. And that's at least 50 feet, no?
Yeah. Yeah. So if you go to if you could go to the next slide, David. It's a picture it shows that when they did the investigation, it kind of shows the distance that he got launched. So number 1 is where the impact initially happened. That's the crosswalk. And if you look far in the distance there, you see that last cone up there is where he came to arrest. So, and that's the car that hit him. So he rolled up onto the onto the windshield. And he basically he broke his entire right side of his body is a good way of putting it. Compound fractures in his legs, multiple fractures in his backbone. He broke his arm, he dislocated his shoulder, and facial fractures, cranial fractures. He ultimately ended up having a brain bleed. And he was in the hospital for over a month, but he was in physical therapy, through the Ronald McDonald House for 6 months after that.
Wow.
So, but he was I'm getting ahead of myself here. When he was hit by the car, it launched him. He landed underneath the overpass there. His sister and brother-in-law were literally one step behind him when this happened, and Tyrone actually grabbed Lexi and pulled her back to try to keep her from getting any closer to it. They had to, the EMTs rushed to the scene. She thought he was dead. He woke up, screaming and crying, and he couldn't see, and that kind of didn't even. He doesn't remember any of this, by the way. But they rushed him to the hospital, induced him into a coma for 11 days. They fortunately didn't have to do any surgery on his brain. They were able to, I guess, wait for the swelling to go down. But the damage to his brain was irreversible. I mean, where he's still, and he will always be dealing with the issues that he has, in his head for the remainder of his life, much less the physical, the bones breaking and all that stuff too. If you would, David, could you go to since we're talking about, his injuries, this is a mock-up of a brain scan that we had done for him. All those little red areas there that they have, on the artist rendering, and then you can see them in the X-ray too, but the artist rendering makes them pop a little bit more. Those were where he had microhemorrhages, which is basically a brain bleed. And the way that the doctors described it in trial was that the brain bled for a period of time, and then it went away. So it didn't continue to bleed because the brain heals you. The body heals you, you know what I mean? And so it healed him. But the problem is that when you have those bleeds in the brain there like that, it removes pathways in your brain, and they don't ever come back. And so that's the irreversible damage that he has in his head. If you could go to the next slide, please. So he got hit, or not hit on the left side, he got hit on the right side, but the brain damage was mostly on the left side there where he bled out. Yep, and that's him now. So these are in recovery, obviously, and then some were from afterwards. One of the major issues physically, not mentally, which is frankly the real tragedy of the case, is the kid that I know, because I've never met the Max from before. The kid that I know isn't the kid that his family knew, that his friends knew, that I have had described to me on so many different occasions. He's just not the same guy anymore. Not to mention the physical aspects of it. Like I was saying a minute ago, when he woke up from his coma, they had him in the in the ICU for about a month afterwards. And then he went into outpatient therapy after they released him. And because, again, they're tourists, right? They're from South Africa. They don't have any place to go. So Ronald McDonald House took him in for 6 months. And so they lived at the Ronald McDonald House, which I can't say enough nice things about. I mean, it's an incredible organization. They did amazing work for them in a incredibly traumatic situation that they were dealing with, and that they're still dealing with, frankly. But at that time, it was all fresh and new, and they were still trying to figure out what was going on with him. But he did physical therapy for 6 months, which is about when I got the case. He did physical, when he was doing the physical therapy, it was incredibly painful because if you can see his arm is bound up there. Mm-hmm. What was going on was after they did the surgeries on his legs and his arm, and they got him in a spot where they didn't think they were going to need to do surgical intervention on his brain. His right arm kept dislocating. They had trouble actually keeping it in the socket. And so what they ultimately ended up doing is they fused it in there to help it heal. And then the physical therapy was basically breaking that. And it was just it sounded like it was just excruciatingly painful. Jesus. It was brought tears to his eyes every single day. They were doing it 2 or 3 times a day. And it was just, the road to recovery was difficult. And, even after the physical aspects of it, he's never going back to surfing again. He's never going back to skateboarding, which I didn't put in here, but skateboarding, surfing, going to Sky Zone type places, that stuff, that's not happening anymore. This is a 16-year-old kid. You know what I mean? All that's off the table,
So they planned on coming and visiting here for what, a week, 2 weeks?
2 weeks, yeah.
So they were going to be here for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. They were on what, day 1 or 2?
No. They were at the end because they were up in New York initially.
Got it.
And then they came down here, and they only had 3 or 4 days left, if that. They were going to spend a few more days here, and then they were going back.
So they were here for 72 more hours. This happens, and then how long did they end up staying?
They're still here.
They're still here.
Yeah.
Years later.
Yes. Yeah, because COVID happened shortly after this.
Oh my God.
It's a wild story, man. So yeah.
Jeez. So you pick the case up.
Mm-hmm.
You meet the family. You obviously hear the story. Not the first time someone in this area's, pedestrian's been hit.
Right.
Actually happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We had on Jeff Speck, who was talking about how here locally, this is a major issue, far beyond a lot of other areas of the country.
Yep.
When you picked the case up, did you think kind of here we go again type thing? I mean, you're not, this is not the first story you've heard of something like this happening.
Right. Yeah, and as an attorney, I try to put myself in the shoes of juries, right? I litigate cases, I try cases. So ultimately, at the end of the day, every case that comes across my desk is potentially going to end up in front of the citizens of Pinellas County or Clearwater or Tampa or Hillsborough or whoever it is, right? So I have to think about. I'm constantly thinking about what are they going to think? What are the people going to think, right?
Right.
And so when I'm initially getting this case, my first thought is oh my God, this is terrible.
Yeah.
What a horrible thing to have happen to a 16-year-old kid and to this whole family. One of the things that I love about this case, and it will forever stay with me, is the strength of this family and how they've not bonded. They were already bonded together. That's the thing, is that this would be a completely different scenario for Max if he didn't have such a strong family unit that rallied around him and just pulled out all the stops in order to help. So as an attorney, that was one of the things that really attracted me to the case, because I was just yeah, I want to help them out. I want to fight for them. But also I'm a realist, at the end of the day, it's going to end up in front of a jury. What is that going to look like? So I started doing my investigation, and just initially, just off the cuff, the story they told me where they were stuck on the south side of the intersection, that was the first indicator to me. I was well, that's odd, so maybe I should look into that, right? So, I sent out, I did my attorney thing, send out letters and stuff like that to get evidence. We did a FOIA request to the city of Clearwater, public records request, and got back a bunch of documents. And I started looking through it, and I thought, all right, there's something else going on here. This intersection doesn't seem like it's being well maintained. They're saying that the crosswalks didn't change for them. To me, that's, obviously that's a glitch, right? If they're telling me what happened, then there's a glitch. Well, if there's a glitch, who's responsible for the glitch, right? Who's responsible for the maintenance? Not maintenance, that comes later. Who is responsible for making sure that doesn't happen, because there's going to be somebody at the city of Clearwater, or at this time, I didn't know it was the city of Clearwater. It could have been Pinellas County. It could have been the Florida Department of Transportation. It could have been, I don't know, the state of Florida and just itself, right?
Is the governing body for whatever intersection or roadway a pedestrian fatality, or if a pedestrian gets hit, is it usually, do the attorneys usually look at the driver first? Like, well, was the driver speeding? Were they not paying attention?
Yes.
And so as you dug a little bit under the surface, you're like, wait a second, this is kind of not necessarily all up to the driver. This is a little bit deeper than that.
Right. So I don't know how else to say it, but like, I think the driver's a victim too. I mean, that's how this has kind of played out for me. Like, So the answer the answer to your direct question is yes. So I looked into the driver. That's one of the first places to start at, right? And I mean, frankly, it's easier than going, looking into the city, looking into the crosswalk glitch. You know what I mean? Like, that's more unusual than just like your standard garden variety car accident case. But as I started digging into it and started getting the records, started looking into, the driver specifically, and then also the greater facts of the case, to me, and strangely, I shouldn't say strangely enough, but like what ended up bearing out at trial, because the driver testified in trial. She was in therapy for 2 years after this. She thought she killed the kid. She thought she killed Max. She had just had a baby. It's a heartbreaking scenario. Like, everyone's impacted. Like, I talked to, there were witnesses who were across the intersection. So if you could go back to the intersection, David, please, the picture, slide 3. Yeah, thanks. So like at the next one up, we'll do that in a sec. If you look at the Gulf to Bay Boulevard on the west side, southwest side there by where that, like, kind of like that lake is, there are witnesses, there were drivers that were in the front lane there that were parked that saw it happen. I talked to them. They were impacted by it because they had to get out of their car and go over, because like this kid just got, her words, not mine, ragdolled. And so she went over there being the good citizen that she is, and trying to help out as best that she could.
Mm-hmm.
But like when I called her and I said, hey, because you do that as an attorney, you call people up and like, hey, I'm an attorney, I'm investigating such and such a matter. Like, I was just wondering if you remembered this happening. And like everybody remembers that. If they were involved, they vivid memories of it.
How do you find a driver sitting there? Do you see a license plate?
Mm-mm. The police report.
Police report.
Yeah. So they called in. The Clearwater Police Department called in their traffic homicide guy to come do an investigation. Because again, I think mostly everybody that was there thought he wasn't going to make it through the night.
Yeah.
So he comes in and does a homicide investigation, because that's what you do. And so witnesses. So when I was looking at the crash report and I was looking at the homicide investigation, they had witnesses listed in it.
Followed up with those people that had made statements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Called them all up. What'd you see? Because like with the nature of the case, it's not, this doesn't jump out as like, even despite the glitch, it doesn't necessarily jump out as like, oh, I'm going after the city of Clearwater. Like, where's the evidence going to lead me in a case like this? But with a case like this, with a kid like this and a family like this, like, turn over every stone, so let's see what we can find.
So the first indication for you that there was a greater issue here that you could involve the city of Clearwater is when you heard that they sat down there for like 30 or 40 minutes.
Yep.
Which to me is, again, I have the same feeling. Wait a second. That's an incredibly, first of all, generous amount of time. I wouldn't wait that long. If I was alone or with my family, I'd be like, all right, guys, like, stay close. Let's freaking do this. What are you going to do? You don't have a choice.
Right.
So when you see it's 30 or 40 minutes that they waited and then made the attempt to cross in the safest manner they thought they could, where do you involve the city? Is that a call? Is it like a records request? Who's maintaining this? Where do you start?
Well, initially I sent a letter. You send a letter, we call them 627 letters in my world. It basically just lets them know, hey, I've been hired as an attorney. And like, we're doing a policy request. Like, is there any insurance? I knew there's no insurance, but it's a standard letter that you send out to everybody. It basically just lets them know, hey, I represent this person. There's potential action here. And it kind of is like your shot across the bow, I guess, if you're going to look at it like that. And then, there's a dialogue that typically ensues after that where like, you get, like they have a risk assessment or a risk manager, not an adjuster. Like if I'm working with an insurance company or something like that, you're getting an adjuster every single time. But if it's, if it's some of the sovereigns, like they call them risk assessors, and they have like their own guys that they employ full time to do that sort of thing. So anyway, so he got in contact with us, and we started the dialogue there.
And where did it evolve into? Did he show you the reason why these lights were not working?
No, just denied it. They just denied it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they just denied it. And they also said that it was my client's fault for walking across the street when it said don't walk.
How quick were they to give you an answer like that?
I mean, I can't tell you the exact, but it was within a couple of months, within 6 months, I would say.
Which is probably considered quick for them to just say, yeah, no, it was your client.
Fairly, yeah. It was a fairly quick response, yeah.
Did they make an attempt to look into the timing of the lights, the maintenance?
I don't know. I can give you my suspicions, but I actually don't know.
So they come back and they basically say, no, everything was working fine. We don't know why they would have waited a half hour, 45 minutes, and it's your client who's at fault.
Right. Yep. That's pretty much what it was.
And so you didn't take that as a good enough answer.
Nope. No, I didn't. So what happened when they did that so I guess this is when I initially got the case. So there's a law in the state of Florida, and I'm not going to be able to quote the exact statute, but there's a law in the state of Florida that caps the government. When you sue the government, it doesn't matter what the injury is, it caps them at $200,000 per person. So that means that you could have like, let's use the PSTA as an example, but and just pick any bus. I'm not trying to pick on the PSTA, but any like, municipal bus that's being run or whatever, right? And it kills somebody. Like the driver makes a mistake, he's looking at his phone or something like that, whatever it happens. And it just, it hits somebody and there's a terrible accident, a rollover accident or whatever, right? $200,000 is the max that is allowable by law, unless you go up to Tallahassee and you lobby the government to make an exception. So there is an avenue for the exception, but it involves lobbyists, it involves politicians, it involves a whole nother aspect of advocating that is atypical for, most personal injury attorneys,
That sounds like a dangerous policy to have in place. I mean, I understand why they have it. The government deals with so much.
Right.
And of course, mistakes are made all the time. Could the government even operate effectively if they were just being sued for millions and millions every day, all day?
Right.
So I understand the reason why it's in place.
Yep.
But for a circumstance like this, it makes your job 10 times more challenging, right?
Yeah. The problem is that it's too low. The number's too low. Like, I agree with you. I think that there should be a policy in place that should, cap the damages. And I also think that there should be a way to get an exception. I don't think that the claims bill process, which is what I'm talking about going to Tallahassee, I think that should be reformed and should be changed. I think it's very difficult to go through that process. I'm going through it right now with this particular case, and we can talk about that later if you want to. But the $200,000 just isn't what it used to be. You know what I mean? And I'm not trying to like be trite, because I mean most people would love to just get $200,000. Don't get me wrong, but
Sure.
like again, like for like a giant government like the city of Clearwater, or like even like a corporation like a Walmart or a Target or something like that, $200,000 is nothing to them. You know what I mean? Like, that's the cost of doing business to them.
No, and what was the medical bills alone?
$1 million.
$1 million.
$1 million. Yep.
Plus, probably more if you were going to include rehab for 6 months with the Ronald McDonald. I know that's
with all of it.
With all of it.
Yeah. So the Ronald McDonald was free. Like, that's what's cool about them. They let them stay there for free. But the physical therapy was not free. And so like it was $1 million for him to stay in the hospital over a month.
Wow.
And then on top of that, like the physical therapy for that. And then there was more treatment after that as well. So, it's so
$200,000 would not come close to covering.
And here's the thing, like, we attempted to initially resolve the case at the caps, and they said no. So
they would not even resolve it for the 200.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's why they fell back on it was working fine. And even if it wasn't, then your client, shouldn't have crossed.
So and this is the city of Clearwater you're dealing with. I guess they're the traffic unit of some sort.
They're the ones responsible for the intersection.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you're dealing with them. They basically say it's not our fault.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you dig deeper, and then what transpired from there?
All right. So what happened is, like I said, I did like a public records request, I did a FOIA request. And what I found out is, and if you would go to slide 4 for me, please. And this is about a 2-minute long video. This was a video taken by the police officers that I was telling. This was introduced in trial, and this is he's investigating the case. So you can see the The cones are still out. There's a couple of police officers still doing correct. Yeah. And so he's standing where they would have started. And he's basically filming the crosswalk not changing. So I also had this. When I got this, it was like, okay, so now it's not just them telling me that it was messed up. Now we have physical evidence from the Clearwater Police Department showing that it's messed up, that it's not working. So it corroborates what they were telling me.
This episode is brought to you by the official remodeler of the TBD Podcast, Kohler House Remodeling Company. Built on the belief that every homeowner deserves a premium experience, Kohler House is redefining high-end home remodeling with their commitment to integrity, craftsmanship, and quality communication. Their work speaks for itself, from condos in the towers of Channelside to 100-year-old homes in South Tampa, creating spaces that are both stunning and functional. What sets Kohler House Remodeling Company apart is their dedication to not only transforming homes into beautiful spaces, but to elevating the standard of residential general contracting. From concept to completion, every detail is handled with care, ensuring a process that's as smooth as the results are impressive. To learn more, check out our partner's website at kohlerhouse.net, KOHLERHAUS.net. This episode is sponsored by Chansey Architecture and Interior Design. Rooted in the heart of Ybor City for over 35 years, Walt Chansey and his team are trailblazers in their field. Beyond their work across the United States and the Bahamas, Chansey has shaped some of the most iconic residential and commercial spaces that serve as gateways to Cigar City, including Casa Marti and Casa Gomez. What sets Chansey Design apart is their ability to preserve the soul and character of historic buildings while seamlessly integrating modern design and functionality. They blend tradition with innovation, creating spaces that honor the past while meeting today's needs. Check out their work at www.chanseydesign.com. So this is a police officer himself trying to get across the intersection the night of, and it's not changing.
Right. So he's putting himself in the position of Max, and he's like, all right, well, I was told that the crosswalks may have been malfunctioning, so I'm going to go see if the crosswalks are malfunctioning. And they were, and so he thought that was strange enough that he videoed it.
So he just took this upon himself.
Well, I mean, it's part of his job. He's a,
is it part of his job to check out to see if the intersection worked? I guess, because it's like, why did this occur?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And they told him, he was given information by I don't know who it was specifically. I would imagine it was probably Tyrone, because Tyrone remained at the scene while Alexia went in the ambulance with Max. But so he was, running like police officers do when they're running down leads. Like, it's basically a lead, right? Okay, it was messed up. All right, I'll go check to see if it's messed up.
And it's right there. It's easy enough to test out. Mm-hmm. Let me record it and see what happens.
Right.
And it never changes.
Never changes.
Now, when you get this video in combination with their denial, and they said, oh, it was working.
Right.
That must kind of change everything for you.
Well, the video definitely changed everything for me.
Right.
I'm getting kind of cynical. I've been doing this for over 10 years now. So when I get a denial, I'm just like, all right, move on. Let's really see if that's the case.
It's not the first time you've had someone deny something.
Yeah, it's not the first time I've been told no. But yeah, getting this for sure, 100%. So then I started getting records. And if you could pop down there, great. Thank you, sir. All right, so this is called a signal cabinet access log, which is just a long-winded way of saying this is the log that the guys that are maintaining that particular intersection enter when they go to the intersection. All right. So during the course of the case, so after all this happens, I get the case, I'm doing my investigation. Ultimately, we file a lawsuit, right? So once we file the lawsuit, we get even more records. But I also took a deposition of Ted Mellis, who is the traffic signals manager for the city of Clearwater. Okay. So he's basically the guy that's in charge of the people who take care of the intersections. Okay. He's also the guy that sat as what we call a corporate representative. We call them corporate representatives. So, because whenever you see like a Walmart or like a city of Clearwater, it's this big abstract. You need someone to sit down and actually act as basically the corporation, right? So he was the guy that sat down as their corporate representative. So he's the guy that has the most knowledge about what's going on here. So when I talked to him about that, I said, I'm asking him, like, what are your procedures? How do you check these things? How do you make sure that the signals are operating properly, that they're not just being left to go into flash mode for, days on end? And so, throughout the, like 4 hours or whatever that I did the deposition, and then also at trial, I learned that this is the way that they keep track of who's been at the intersection. So and this is, I'm going to paraphrase here, but, if they send a technician out to an intersection and they do anything at the intersection at all, they're supposed to log themselves in, right? So date, time, the name, or their initials, and then the reason that they're there. Okay. So you can see that they do all this stuff. They start from the oldest to the newest on the bottom, just because that's the top. So when they first get in there, they fill it out, right? And they put all kinds of stuff in there. So one of the things, and you can see where the yellow highlighter is there, it says maintenance there, MAINT is maintenance. So what they do is that the city of Clearwater has a policy in place where they do what they call them biannual maintenance checks. So that just means they check them twice a year. And they have 138 intersections, at least at the time when this was going on, that the city of Clearwater was responsible for maintaining. So that was under Mr. Mellis's purview, or the traffic signals department. That was under their purview, right? So they do everything from maintain to repair to deal with construction issues. And one of the things that they deal with is like problem calls. They'll, somebody will call in to a hotline and they'll say, hey, this traffic light's out, or hey, there's a sign down from a hurricane or something like that, right? And then they respond to those as well. So basically just like, call-ins, or like a lot of times police officers will call stuff in. So anyway, they keep track of, or at least they're supposed to keep track of what's going on at the intersections. And that one right there, the March 4th of 2019 was the closest in time to the collision when they went out to do a maintenance check. So the next thing, if you could go to slide 12 for me. We'll come back to that in a minute.
Now, is this all they have? There's no centralized software. There's no, it's like a sheet you'd find in a gas station bathroom.
There's a little bit more to it than that.
Sure.
But basically that's what this is. So we've got the signal traffic access logs, the semi-annual traffic signal preventative maintenance sheet, which this actually, what I learned as the case went on is that, so you see the date there, 12/26/2019. Mm-hmm. So our accident happened in May of 2019. So this is afterwards, right? Why is that? Because they didn't exist until December of 2019. So now, at least for this particular intersection, so they deny that they created these as a result of what happened to Max. My own personal belief is that they were implemented post that because of that reason, because they needed more of a checklist. So what he did say at the deposition when I asked him about that directly is that this checklist, specifically this with its 50 or some odd different things that they're supposed to do, each one of these things, I should take a step back here. What does this do? This is a checklist that the technicians are supposed to take with them every time they do a maintenance check. Every time they go to any intersection in the city of Clearwater, there's 138 intersections. They do them 2 times a year. They're supposed to now take this with them. And they're supposed to do every single one of these things that's on this checklist here, okay? These didn't exist at the time of the crash. What Mr. Mellis did testify to, and what he did tell me that they did do, is they had this one sheet, but it was posted like back at HQ. And so they didn't have to take it into the field with them. They didn't have to document everything. It's just like, hey, these are the things that you're supposed to keep in mind. Go get them.
So you don't have this sheet right here to show you before the accident because it just simply didn't exist.
Correct.
The only thing you have is that log to see when they were there.
Correct.
Meaning it just on go back one slide, David, because I think it just says maintenance, or it's an abbreviation for maintenance, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Maint.
Yep.
But you don't know the details of that. You don't know what they checked, what they didn't check, what that even means.
Right. So like worst case scenarios, they literally walked out there, looked and go, it's good. Check. They don't do any of the things.
But there's no way of verifying. What about talking?
Correct.
I'm sure you talk with that particular person who was there on that date who put maintenance, right?
So we actually didn't talk to them. No, we didn't talk to those guys because they had quit and they didn't work for the city of Clearwater anymore. And we actually didn't end up running them down. But we did talk to Ted about it. And one of the things that we also learned is that if you go to 13 there, if you don't mind. So you're asking about the centralized database. This is the centralized database. All right. So there's limited information that's in here, though. Now, he did testify that if it's in the signal log up at the top there, it's supposed to go into the centralized database. And the thing that I'm kind of coming to here is that you see here too on 12/20 of 2019, it says 6-month maintenance.
Yes.
There's nothing there next to it.
Mm.
So they're not telling you like we did this, we did that, we did this. It's just that the maintenance was performed. Check.
Got it.
Right. So again, kind of going back to the slide number 12 there, the maintenance sheets. These didn't exist. These weren't being done for the entire city of Clearwater until late 2019 is I think the most accurate way to put it.
And on the centralized log on slide 13, David, it does say something about there's an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So called to US 19 in Gulf Bay after pedestrian was struck by vehicle. It was stated that after hitting the ped button to cross south to north, crossing Gulf Bay Boulevard, that the walk indication never serviced. Upon arrival, I pushed buttons numerous times for south to north pedestrian, and the walk indication always came up. No problem was found on arrival or the next day when I checked again.
Right. So that's interesting, right? So that came up at trial as well. So if you go back to the
cop video, right?
Right. Well, the video obviously, right? The video obviously clearly shows that it was messed up.
Sure.
But if you go to the if you go back to the signal cabinet accident number 10, please. I know we're jumping around here. If you look down at the bottom there where it says 5/23/2019.
Yes.
And then you go to if you go to the next page, if the slide number 11, then it goes to 6/12 of 2019. 5/28 isn't in there. 5/29 is not in there. It wasn't logged in there. So he testified that he went out to the scene on the night of the accident, and then there was also follow-up on the next day. But there's no log of it in the signal cabinet access log.
Why wouldn't there be a log of it?
I don't know. It's interesting, right?
It is interesting.
Because then on top of that, he says that there was no glitch, that there was no defect, when clearly the video shows that there's a defect. And then if you look there where it's highlighted on June 12th of 2019, so like 2 weeks after the accident happened, it says that on the right there, it said check the pedestrian button at 6, rewired the button on the southeast side, which is where they initially left and made the crossing.
So why rewire if there's no issue?
Right. And it's only 2 weeks afterwards.
I don't get I mean, to me, the video is the best evidence you could ever have that says, hey, it doesn't work. Here's a police officer's video trying to cross. You never get the little white walking figure.
Right.
It just stays static,
Yep.
red.
Mm-hmm.
When that is shown to them, what do they say?
They were trying to make it seem like the police officer wasn't pushing the right button. Yeah.
Because the video doesn't show him pushing any button at all.
Right. So we had to recall him, actually. We recalled him to ask him those questions in trial.
What'd he say?
He said, I'm not a child. He looked at the jury. He says, I'm not a child. I push the right buttons.
Wow.
Yep.
So you find all this stuff out, right? You eventually get to trial.
Mm-hmm.
All this evidence is put in front of a jury.
Mm-hmm.
The questions are asked, right? The police officer's up on the stand. This worker for the city of Clearwater, who is in charge of all this, gets up there and has to answer questions. How does the trial end up?
So what happens is basically, again, their argument was more or less on the liability side that it was more or less working and that it was my client's fault. And so we obviously get up there and state the opposite. And the jury comes back at 45-55 on liability. So 45% liability is on the city of Clearwater, 55% liability is on my client. So the jury does make a determination between my own client's fault in the matter, but also acknowledges the fault of the city, which is huge, frankly, because I know that there are certain individuals out there that would look at a case like this and think, well, he should have made it. He should have found a way to safely cross. It's on his, it's all his fault, which obviously, our arguments in front of the jury were he's a 16-year-old South African tourist who got stuck on one side of the road. He didn't know where he was. He'd only been here for 4 hours. So I think it was I thought the jury did a fair job. Mm-hmm. I would have liked to have seen it higher, frankly. But I have a lot of faith in the jury system in this country, and we did get a good jury, and they did a good job considering the evidence. So I'm not upset with a 45-55 split.
What was your expectation going in, kind of all or nothing with the liability, or did you figure there would be a portion of your client, just because of the fact that when you cross a road, kind of at the end of the day, you are responsible to look both ways, and at some level, you're responsible. You're the one crossing.
Given that he's a 16-year-old South African tourist who'd only been here for like 4 hours, yeah, I thought that it should be higher. I thought it should be higher, and we went for 100%, because it wouldn't have, but for that happening, he wouldn't have got hit by a car.
Sure.
He's not familiar with the area. What's he supposed to do?
So going through this whole process, obviously it's still ongoing, right? You've been doing this for 6 years with this particular case, but it's brought more questions maybe than answers on this overarching conversation about pedestrian safety.
Yep.
And part of that is your efforts in Tallahassee. Mm-hmm. Right. So what's going on at the Capitol in regards to this?
So we got a $38 million, call it, verdict from the jury after we actually did liability on its own first, and then we did damages afterwards, because the injuries were so significant that the judge wanted to make sure that the jury had like a neutral perspective. They weren't being influenced by the amount of, damage that was caused to Max, because no one was disputing that he was horribly injured. With the change, or excuse me, with the liability taken into account, they call it $16 million is what he is entitled to. But with the $200,000 caps, as we've already talked about, we're limited to $200,000 caps. And I should say it, since this is being recorded, that the city of Clearwater is pursuing an appeal right now. I don't think that the appeal is really going to go very far. They're obviously entitled to their appeal, and they could still potentially win on that. But that being said, we have already started the process to go to Tallahassee and engage in what's called the claims bill process. So what's a claims bill? A claims bill, the way that I like to describe it, is basically a summary of the case to politicians. And so what has to happen is they have to vote on a bill. We actually have to submit a bill in both the Senate and the House, and they have to vote on it. And they have to vote either yay or nay. And if it passes, then we, whatever is in the bill.
For your specific case, or this is to change this entire process?
Just for the specific case.
So anytime anyone has a claim that they want to reach above that $200,000 limit, they have to essentially go through the Florida legislature?
Not essentially. They absolutely have to do it. That's the way it works. There's like there's one exception, but it doesn't happen very often.
Gosh, what an oddly, seemingly like archaic way to operate a state with over 20 million people, with all the other problems that the legislature has to work through to take on an individual case. Like, how many cases like this are they looking at annually? I
think they do somewhere between 10 and 20 every year.
So it's not an insane amount,
right?
But it's such an impactful decision. It's like, I feel like just from the public's perspective, my perspective, seems like it's just too important to dish out to the legislatures. I don't know. I mean, I understand their role, and I understand how opening up that liability door would really hurt local government, hurt the state. I get it. But there's got to be a better middle ground there.
So I would agree with you. And to me, it seems like the easy answer is to increase the caps.
Right.
And every year, just about every year, somebody will introduce a bill that will increase the caps, but it's never been increased. I know that there was an increase, I think, in the 90s. I think it went from being the old standard, I think, was $100,000, and they moved it to $200,000. It might have been the 70s though, but it went from 100 to 200. And I mean, frankly, I think there's a bill in front of them right now for $1 million. So I don't know if they voted on it yet. If they haven't done it today, they'll be doing it in the next few weeks. But that's been up in front of the legislature a few different times. This isn't the first time that it's happened. So, but to me, that seems like an easier response than claims billing everything, because, what we run into as plaintiffs' attorneys, what we run into are cases that have validity, where, the damages are extreme or they're bad. They may not, extreme is like what happened to Max. Thankfully, it's not everybody. But you get people that are hurt, like they're legitimately hurt. They're not going back to the way they were before the accident or whatever, right? Like they can't, go out and play football with their kids anymore or something like that, right? Like they're still able to lead happy, productive lifestyles, but they're just not who they used to be, right? those cases can be, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. It's just the nature of life now. Inflation's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So $200,000 is a pretty low bar. And what ends up happening is, I get a case and I'm valuing the case. Let's just call it $1 million. I value the case at $1 million legitimately. Like, I think it's a good case and we can get definitely over $200,000. But then what ends up happening is you get against these defense attorneys, and to their credit, it's a good strategy. I would do the same thing. I used to be a defense attorney. I did some of the same things, but it's a problem, which is why I want to illustrate it. They know that you're probably not going to go after a claims bill. And there's no punishment for them if they go and they lose in trial and they get the $200,000. You see what I'm saying?
Because the process is so muddy to pursue through the legislature, et cetera, that all the defense attorneys kind of know you're not going to go that route.
Right. So what happens is they'll make an offer like $150,000 or something like that, and they'll try to like get you to take a $150,000 offer on a case that's worth $1 million, because you're not going to like go to trial for $50,000 extra dollars. You know what I mean? So it becomes kind of like it becomes a math problem, kind of like at the end of the day, but it hurts society
for sure.
Because what ends up happening, and the broader point to this is that for most of these government entities, $200,000 is nothing to them. I was, in preparation for talking to you today, like I did some research on like tourism dollars in just Pinellas County alone. They did $10.8 billion economic impact, which is great. I live in Pinellas County. I love Pinellas County. I chose here to live. I live here for a reason. Like, I have kids. I have a family. I love it here. I want tourists to come here. But I also want them to be safe, and I want our families to be safe when we're out and about doing what we do. But $200,000 is nothing when you're talking about $10.8 billion per year.
Right.
Per year, right? And that's great for all of us who live and work in this area. But like, the government needs to be held to account. And when they're not having to pay for the repercussions of their actions, what's going to force them to do anything?
That's exactly right. They have to have the proper incentive structure to make a change, right? So you said the city of Clearwater kind of on paper's share was 16 million, right? Of that 45%. Boy, if the city had to write a check to your client for 16 million, seems like they would be pretty quick to fix all the traffic signals around the city.
Yeah.
But if they're only having to write a $200,000 check to 10 people, that's only, I say only, right? And these are obviously people, so it's kind of, it's weird to talk like this in general terms. But
welcome to my world.
Yeah, I know, right? You have to walk a weirdly tight,
it's a strange
emotional rope here.
It's a strange world.
But 10 times 200,000, $2 million for a city, it doesn't really hurt. They can kind of operate business as usual and not necessarily make a change and not feel the effects, but they have to pay 16 million on one case. They'd probably spend millions of dollars in order to adequately fix all these intersections so this doesn't happen again.
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, they say.
Yeah. So what's your hope in all of this? Obviously, outside of this case, you want to do right by your client. You want to make sure that they get compensated not only for the damage, but for his life essentially being ruined. I mean, his old life, like the way this kid lived his life. First of all, what a badass name. He must be Greek.
Right.
Maximus. I mean, it's incredible. But his way of life is over, and he's so young, he doesn't get to enjoy it. So I'm sure you're very much focused on doing right by that family and doing right by Max. But what's your overall hope, and kind of, are you going to reach further with this thing and try to influence change?
I just want to move the needle a little bit. Would be great. I would hope that some people see this that are in greater positions of power than I am, that see this and say, hey, yeah, this is a problem. Have some meetings.
Yeah.
Have some meetings that could potentially change the trajectory of the way that, not just the city of Clearwater, but just like the entire Tampa Bay area in general looks at these problems, because it's not just, people that are going to and from work. It's people from out of town. It's kids. It's not just adults. It's, and it's not just Max either. Like, there's people that Pinellas County is one of the most deadliest pedestrian counties in the entire country, and I understand that there's layers of history on how the roadways were built and why they exist the way that they do. And I understand that there's laws in place that govern how, when, where, what is going to be placed there. But if those people can just have a conversation, hey, maybe we could do a review of our maintenance systems. Maybe we can go out and look at some of our bigger intersections and think, what could we do differently here? Could we make this better? I mean, specifically to the US 19 and Gulf to Bay intersection, like maybe a flyover walkway for pedestrians. I know that was considered because I've done my research on this. A few blocks just east of there, they considered it there back in like 2015, 2016. They didn't do it, and that's their right. They can do that. But like just to consider it, just to look at these things.
And maybe that's a state law that could be implemented. That intersection is really a perfect example. David, I know you're busy right now. Can you pull that up on the screen share so we can see that top down just of the intersection? So, in my head, if you're working on this whole project, right, building US 19, this highway above the intersection, I think this was, God, I don't want to spitball. It was certainly over $100 million. 500 million sounds wrong. Maybe it was like $150 million project to extend the highway.
Okay.
If you're going to spend that kind of money, shouldn't you also implement some sort of a pedestrian plan too?
You would think, right?
Why are you leaving it up to paint on a road and a couple of lights that apparently didn't work?
Yeah.
When if you're going to spend $150 million on a highway at a very, very high traffic corridor,
Yep.
And yes, most people do not walk. Most people get in their car and drive to these retailers. But maybe that's a state law. Maybe that's an easier fix, is to put in some sort of a study, put in some sort of a budget where if you're going to do an infrastructure improvement project that's $100 million on a roadway, you're required to spend X amount of money studying the pedestrian safety and implement some sort of a walkway, implement some sort of a better lighting system, anything, something. And I'm sure that they look at that sort of stuff when they're doing these projects, but clearly it's not enough. We talked earlier about that park I visit at the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you put a crosswalk to a park? To me, it's like, duh, put in a lighting system and some paint at a minimum.
Yep.
If you need to put a traffic light, if you need to go further, look, a pedestrian bridge probably costs tens of millions of dollars. I bet you it's extremely expensive to do that. But when you're talking about the life and the death of people, and maybe it wouldn't matter so much if it's hard to say it wouldn't matter, but maybe it wouldn't be such a large point if you're in an area that doesn't enjoy the tourism we do. But oh my God, we have people coming here from around the country and around the world. You can't expect them to understand how our traffic flow works. We all understand as Floridians and people that live in the area kind of how things operate. It's not always as simple as red light, green light, right here, left here. It's like when you're in traffic in the area, you almost get this like you're in the flow of things. Like You're in traffic, you're a part of traffic. And when you're in traffic, you're not necessarily looking for that kid jumping out in front of you. I'm sure that lady had no expectation that someone was going to go right in front of her.
Yep.
She probably just simply saw traffic flowing, green light. Sounds like she was going the speed limit.
Yep.
Sounds like she frankly didn't do anything out of the ordinary.
Yep.
And it just happened to be her sitting in the car that hit the kid. Could have been me, could have been
anybody.
you, could have been anybody. So it's almost like instead of thinking about traffic as a whole, thinking about this whole thing comprehensively. Another thing too we haven't even talked about is biking. Biking is another very dangerous thing in the area. Them putting bike lanes on Dale Mabry. Why? You know what I mean? Why? Like you got to be crazy to use a bike lane on Dale Mabry.
Yeah.
You kind of also have to be crazy to cross this intersection, but why shouldn't people have the ability to do it? You already mentioned there's a guy that works at, I think you said the Five Guys.
There's 5 Guys down there, yeah. Yeah.
There's probably a ton of people that park in different parking lots, cross the intersection, walk to work.
Yep.
Tourists, you got a hotel on the corner, a Holiday Inn, and a restaurant on the other side of the street. Well, how do you think people get there? They're going to drive? They're probably going to walk if they're on vacation.
Yep.
I think in Florida, it's a special circumstance to look at versus other states. We're the highest traffic state in terms of tourism.
Yep.
What is it? David could probably look it up, but I think we're at 20, 30 million visitors. Maybe it's way more than that. But when you're dealing with a place that has so much outside visitation, you got to think outside the box.
You got to be on your A game.
100%.
Yeah, you got to be think outside the box too. And just since you were talking about it, like you can see it in there. The bus stops are on the other side of the.
Exactly.
So like if you're working, which is what Mr. Hernandez was doing, he still is doing, working at the Five Guys down there. he takes the bus to those two places, he has to cross the street.
He has to cross the street.
Right.
And there's so much emphasis on alternative transportation outside of a car, outside of a vehicle,
Yep.
like buses, expanding the bus system. Well, how good is the bus system if it's dangerous for pedestrians to get to the bus stop? Right? How good are, what good is a bike lane? Oh, we need more bike lanes. Okay, well, what good's a bike lane if it's dangerous and not protected against vehicular traffic?
Exactly.
Our metro area now has, I think, 4 million people, with another however many million visitors a year. Like
Yep.
this is a problem that is probably never going away.
Nope.
Probably only increasing and getting worse. And to me, as we make this transition into a more walkable, less car-centric culture, it only makes sense to prioritize some of these projects and maybe not even do a project unless it's viable for everyone. We haven't even talked about people with disabilities. We haven't even talked about, well, I'm in a wheelchair and I'm staying at the hotel and I want to go to Perkins Bakery.
Yep.
Good luck.
Yep.
I mean, that's another conversation too. The sidewalks are broken in a lot of places in this community. I mean, we've taken so much attention in the last few decades for just how to get cars from A to B. And it's so obvious that pedestrians and bikes and people on wheelchairs and other people that need help, they've totally been on the back burner. They have not been at the forefront of the conversation. And I hope that this conversation we're having now and your efforts at least start the process of changing that.
That's what I hope, man. I really hope that the powers that be will just take some time.
Yeah.
Take some time to seriously, in good faith, sit down and consider what's going on, because this is not acceptable. Like we gotta, this could be improved. You know what I mean?
Well, first of all, denying that there is an issue, understanding, the city of Clearwater, they understand the law. They know that if, everything was working great, here's the maintenance check. Well, you don't have the system for it. Oh, well, it wasn't implemented until later in the year. And, good luck getting any money from us. The most you're going to get is 200, right? If they know that that is the natural progression, what motivation do they have to change? Obviously, the city, any municipality deals with so many different things, right?
Yeah.
Trash service, water service, public safety, all that sort of stuff.
Right.
But if there's no real pinch point, nothing will ever change.
Right. Because why change if you don't have to?
Why change if you don't have to?
Right.
And if the only problem or the only repercussion is just a slap on the wrist, $200,000 max payment, then I don't know that this ever is going to change. And then who's next? What family comes and visits this beautiful place that we have? Who comes here next? The light's not working. It takes them a half hour. And so they go, I guess we just got to cross.
Yep.
It's not even about them. It's not about Max. It's not about his family. It could have been anyone.
Could have been anybody.
It could have been the worker.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been me.
Mm-hmm.
I go through this intersection all the time. I could have hit Max. I've been on that exact lane in that exact same circumstance.
Me too. Yeah.
This is just a weird, thing that happened where this poor woman was driving the car and poor Max was crossing the street. Could have been anyone.
Yep. And when Juan Hernandez, the Five Guys worker, I don't remember if it was in deposition or trial, but it might have been both. He even said it. He's like, I don't know this kid. I'm not here for this kid. I'm here because I and my friends go across this intersection on a regular basis, and it's a problem. It's a problem. It glitches all the time. It malfunctions, pretty regularly.
Mm-hmm.
I've had it. He was describing how he'd walk in the crosswalk and it would suddenly change on him. So it would flash white and then it would change back to red and then the lights would turn green.
And this guy goes to work at least probably 5 days
6 days a week.
6 days a
Mm-hmm.
week.
Yep.
And even he's saying, we got problems.
Yes. Yep.
Have you had outside conversations, or do you know if the city of Clearwater is kind of working on these things? I mean, it sounds like they've implemented some maintenance agreements, so they're clearly improving whatever process they have. But have they came to you and said, hey, you've kind of brought to light something we need? Nothing.
No, but that would be great if they did that.
Yeah.
If they want to do that, I'm receptive and I would encourage that conversation.
Okay, so they're not doing that, and they're also denying essentially
responsibility. Well, I don't know if I'm not going to say they're going to deny responsibility since the verdict came back at 45-55, but
sure,
they are appealing it.
They're appealing it, but by denying, I mean they were denying that there's a problem at the intersection.
Yeah,
they're claiming that your client is entirely at fault.
Correct.
That was their position.
Yes.
I guess you'll find out what they have to say in the appellate courts.
We'll find out that's a different, like the appellate courts are going to be, that's more limited to like legal issues. So it's not going to be as factual, but we'll find out when we go to do the claims bill, because we'll present to the claims bill.
You have to come back on the show and update me. So tell me about that kind of timing. Like when is all that happening?
All right. So we were hoping that we were going to be able to do it in March. We actually had a meeting on it back at the beginning of February, if I recall, maybe end of January, with the special masters. So the special masters are basically the judges. They're not actually judges, but they're judging the situation for the politicians. So when we present to them, it take about a day, I'd imagine, to present the whole thing to them. And then they basically thumbs up or thumbs down whether or not they like the, whether they agree with us or agree with the city. And then that recommendation goes to both the House and the Senate. And then they vote on it based on that. So until the appeal got filed, we were probably going to be doing it at the end of February or the beginning of March. But when the appeal got filed, that's now been put on hold.
Got it.
What we have done, though, is filed the requisite claims bills that are required in order to present to the special masters. So there's one in the Senate, and that's Senator True now out of Lake County who's sponsoring that bill. And then we have Senator Burfield, actually out of Clearwater, who's sponsoring in the House.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is actually pretty incredible. Thank you to those if they're listening. We really appreciate it.
I think everyone has the same goal. I mean, and what I mean by that is I'm not talking about the case, right? I know the city of Clearwater probably has their own perspective on how they want to handle all this. But what I mean, everyone has the same goal is we all want a safe environment to live in. We all want to be able to cross the street and not worry about getting hit. Just as much as a driver, you don't want to hit anyone crossing a street. What if it's your children crossing the street? What if it's you crossing the street? So I think the kind of good silver lining in all of this is we all want a better, safe place to live. And there's good legislators at the state level that clearly want the same thing. It just seems like there's this weird red tape in place that sounds like people know is maybe the wrong policy. I would assume the reason why they don't want to increase the limit, like I'm trying to think of a counter argument. Maybe it's like the slippery slope thing. Oh, we offer 350 next year, it's 500. And then before you know it, the city gets sued for 10 million bucks and we can't, you know what I mean? Like, I think that would be the obvious argument against it. But where's the pushback? Have you heard arguments against raising that limit?
Yeah, it's pretty much what you just said. Like we don't want to go too high. $200,000 is enough. Like they're kind of like you were saying earlier. This isn't the only case against the city of Clearwater this year. That's personal injury in nature. You know what I mean? Like you get all kinds of things. Like I would say the vast majority. I don't know this for a fact, but stands to reason. The vast majority of the cases that they're probably getting are like car accidents that their employees get into. You know what I mean? So I can understand like when you're on the defense side, because I was a defense lawyer for a few years. I understand like that mentality. You're just trying to tamp down, keep costs low, keep things low. And you do get those attorneys that will like blow things out of proportion, go get over their skis, those plaintiffs attorneys that'll do that. But generally speaking, from the guys that I know are generally playing it pretty straight down the middle. And also with the way that like just costs in general, and I don't want to talk about inflation, but like it is a thing. $1 million isn't what it used to be.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And so like $200,000 isn't what it used to be. So you get a kid that like, Max had so many grievous injuries. It's not just the traumatic brain injury. That's by far the worst one. But, if I got a case where one kid, they had to put a rod down his leg, that's a big case. A rod down the leg and you got to fix the shoulder, that's a huge case. And you're fixing the arm and you've got broken back and you've got, it's, those happen more often than what this was, is kind of what I'm getting at. And so the $200,000 cap, when you get a kid that's going to get just with the one rod down the leg, right? That's going to be worth more than $200,000. Like my own experience. That's my position. Even as a defense attorney, I would have thought that, right? So what they're trying to do is they're just trying to keep it down. They're trying to keep costs down. And so, yeah, the best argument is a slippery slope argument. But again, like that's a risk. Sure. Mm-hmm. Okay. But what about the justice? Like what's just in the situation right now?
Right.
We've got, costs getting crazy. I mean, just if you want to spend a week in a hospital, if you have to spend a week in the hospital, you're looking at shelling out easy $100,000. It's not uncommon for people to have to spend, because I have to look at this up close and personal, $50,000 for a weekend in the hospital, So like, just if you get into an accident bad enough where they need to keep you for observation over the weekend, you're looking at 50 grand right there. You know what I mean? So like, and I'm not, all I'm trying to do is lay the foundation for how much this stuff costs. Like it's expensive. Life is expensive. And $200,000, while it may have worked in the 70s, we live in 2025.
Sure.
It's different now.
Well, are there different limits depending on the classification of issue? If it's a vehicle, if it's a vehicle involved issue, it's 200. If it's this involved police, it's just 200 is the max.
Generally, legally speaking, if it's personal injury in nature, it's going to be capped at $200,000.
Got it.
Now, if it's workers' comp or if it's a civil rights issue or something like that, like there's other.
I was going to say, because you see in the news, this city has to pay $10 million because whatever, some issue with the police, civil rights, whatever. Boy, well, I hope. It sounds like you've got work to do with your clients, but I hope that there's a larger inspiration here at the state level to adjust some things for pedestrians, because frankly, enough is enough. And it's not that, oh, the American culture is, or me, I want more walkability. No. People are already walking. There's been more, I've seen in the last 5 years, more people on foot, walking their kids to school, exercising more. The American culture itself is more pedestrian oriented than it used to be. Even like when I was growing up, it was all like gated community and the suburbs and all that sort of stuff. I lived in the city and everyone drove everywhere. Mm-hmm. Now people want a place to walk to. I told you the story about, the park in my neighborhood and the coffee shop we all try to walk to. It's not just me though. Like, this isn't just some personal thing. I like to walk. No, like the rest of my community at the coffee shop, I see the families coming out from neighborhoods crossing the street. I see other people walking from the other side of the street. Like, people are congregating in this kind of on foot nature. And I believe with the advent of social media and all this new technology and this internet-based world and podcasting, all of it together, it's so online oriented that people are going to crave more this real visceral experience. Like, I'm not going to just go drive to Starbucks anymore. I want to walk to my local coffee shop. So it's not this like forward thinking, we need to fix pedestrian infrastructure because 10 years from now, everyone's going to walk. No, people are already walking. We are actually behind, way behind.
Yep.
And we need to figure out a way to quickly maybe take baby steps, but at least start with some better road paint, some better markers, certainly fix the damn lights. If you press a button and the light doesn't work, that sounds like an easy fix, right? Just more of a dedication from
and have accountability.
Have
accountability, not just to the government, because that's obviously something that's very important, but like down to like the technology, not the technology, the engineering level, the guys who are actually going out there and actually putting eyes on the intersections, the guys that are actually painting the stripes. They're making sure that the buttons work. Make sure that they have accountability for what they are or aren't doing, more than just a piece of paper hanging in the box at the intersection.
Yeah, like it's a 7-Eleven gas station. I came in, I mopped the floors, check, good to go. No. Take a real dedication to this whole thing.
Implement some tech. Give them iPads so that they can check off the boxes while they're going around and looking at stuff.
Yeah.
So they can add in like notes as they go, and they're like, hey, the brush is overhanging here. I didn't have the equipment to like cut it away. Make a note to have like somebody from, Parks and Rec or whoever might come out to cut that away in the next couple of weeks or whatever, like get more detail oriented and have accountability so that they're not just like putting in a note, like did maintenance, came out, checked the batteries, swapped the batteries out, done,
I get the excuse, 30 years ago when the technology doesn't exist, but today there's no damn good excuse not to implement some sort of technology. Shit, I even see in the next 5 or 10 years, maybe even the technology already exists where you could have some sort of an AI software identify, hey, there's a family waiting at this particular point in the intersection, we're going to go ahead and switch the lights and prepare so that they can cross in the next 3 to 5 minutes, whatever that may be.
Or even gathering data on like the amount of cars. Like we all know they gather data on the amount of cars and stuff to go through, but get like an AI scrub of the data and gather that data so that they can better implement like the traffic signals. Hey, we've got a glitch in this part of the cycle, or, we're not, we're not counting, we're not making adjustments well enough for the pedestrians that are moving through this particular intersection at this particular time of the day. I think that also is something that can be done, because like, as far as I can tell, as I've been going through this case, none of that gets done.
No, it doesn't sound like it. It sounds like they've been doing things the same way for a long, long time. And now that the technology of everything we've talked about is there, or at least is going to be there in the next few years, I think it's time to really push to have it implemented. I don't think there's going to be an excuse anymore for pedestrian deaths. We haven't even talked about automation of vehicles.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to have more autonomous vehicles on the roadways. There's a real opportunity that this region, this state, really this country could take to have like no pedestrian deaths in 30 years from now.
Based on autonomous driving vehicles?
All the above.
It's interesting.
All the above. Autonomous driving, but also autonomous intersections.
Right.
Timed lights, like a camera that says, oh, there's a person standing there. Let me prepare the intersection. Turn that light yellow. You know what I mean? Get things prepared so people can cross safely.
So again, I can tell you based on the research that I've done throughout this case that the technology definitely exists. It definitely exists. But I don't think it's being implemented in the way that we're talking about.
I'm sure it's very expensive.
Yep.
And local governments have a lot of different projects going on.
Yep.
And if they don't have to buy a technology like that, they're not going to.
Right.
Especially if the public is unaware of it, or if the public doesn't have the will to press the politicians to move forward in that direction. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
Unfortunately, things like this, it's so weird, but kind of the way America works is things like this have to happen to Max in order for there to be change.
Correct.
And that's a horrible thing to say, but the reality is this country operates on after effects, right? The whole reason why a school bus has to stop at a railroad is because I would assume a train hit a bus at some point way back in the day, and then those laws are put in place. The public gets angry, the public gets up and tells the politicians what they want, and then changes are made.
And there was probably some attorneys or politicians that were saying that's a slippery slope. If we put in railroad crossings at every railroad, it's going to bankrupt everybody. It's going to, interrupt the flow of traffic. People aren't going to be able to get to work in the time that they want to, and da-da-da-da-da. But now we look back on it, 100 years later, and we're like, why would you not have a railroad crossing?
I even remember, maybe this was recent, but I don't remember as a kid you had to stop on all sides of the street when a bus would stop and the little stop sign would come out. I don't remember that was ever a policy. You used to be able to smoke inside of a Denny's in the 90s.
I do remember.
You know what I mean? It's like, look, things change. I just think that this is something that is it's such an obvious pain point.
Yeah.
Pedestrian fatalities. The city of Tampa has put out Vision Zero. A lot of municipalities are putting out this zero pedestrian death agenda. And there's a lot of efforts in shrinking the roadways and doing more protected bike lanes, wider sidewalks. Like, we are moving in a good direction. I just don't, in my head, this intersection is the last thing on a list like that.
There's a lot of them on US 19 like that too.
Yeah.
They're like
this whole corridor has this problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And I understand what they were going for when they modified it, but like, they've got to make some adjustments. And I mean, like, while this is probably one of the worst case scenarios in this region, there's other places that are like this. I mean, like, we've been talking about it now for, an hour and a half or whatever, but like, kind of going back to the technology point, like my Amazon driver takes photo of every time that they drop a package at my door.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, there's systems that have been used now for over a decade that I feel like could be easily, cost effectively implemented by, especially like, we live in a nice area of the country, like Tampa, city of Clearwater, Sarasota, St. Petersburg. These cities are doing well for themselves, So I think that there's cost effective ways that they could make sure that they're getting, accountability out of the guys that are on the ground doing the actual work to make sure that the infrastructure is maintained.
Well, like you said, at a bare minimum, give them iPads to where they can photograph and have some sort of an evidence chain of, hey, if something did go wrong, let's look back at the record.
Yep.
When was the last time it was maintained? Oh, here's a picture, blah, blah, blah. Like, to me, the archaic system of writing something on a sheet of paper, again, doesn't seem like there's a good excuse to keep implementing that way of doing maintenance when all these other technologies out there exist that Americans are used to using every day.
Right. And it would also tell you where they were and how long they were there, which is actually a point that I didn't make from earlier. Is if you could go back to, David, if you don't mind, I think it was slide number 10. So go back to that 3/4/19, right? So it says the time that they got there was at 12:50. So one of the things that I learned in this case is that it takes on average 8 hours for them to do a maintenance check, and they're done. They're off the clock at like 4 o'clock. So that means that they did, a substandard maintenance check that day. But, if we had the iPad, we know exactly how long they were out there for.
So you don't even know when they left. You just know that they maybe were there or signed out. It doesn't even really give a distinction of, it just says time. It's not start.
Time is time in, not time out.
Time is time in.
Yep.
They could have been there an hour. They could have been there 5 hours. You don't know.
But giving them to the end of the day to give them some leeway, if they leave at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they're only out there for 3 hours and 10 minutes,
which is less than half of the standard
average
check.
8 hours. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yep.
Well, it smells bad all over it. I just hope that, first of all, your client gets what he needs to at least be, God, you can't take it back, but somewhat compensated. And then really, most importantly, I hope a change is made here in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
We have, Florida's an interesting place too for this whole vehicular traffic and pedestrian conversation because we have such a diversity of people on the roadways.
Yep.
We have a lot of visitors that rent cars and come here that are not used to our roads. We have a lot of elderly people, the most out of any other state, drivers, I believe. International tourists that don't even know our road laws, like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yep. So all of that in combination just creates an extremely hectic environment, not only for pedestrians, but people driving cars too. So if there's any state, that really needs to dive deep and create some sort of a standard procedure, to me, this isn't even a municipality thing. This goes way beyond the city of Clearwater.
Agreed.
This is like a state level policy that needs action.
I agree. Yeah.
Some sort of standard procedure for these intersections. So I hope out of your conversation, this conversation, your efforts at the Capitol, change is made. And when are you going to the state again?
We don't know yet. It's on hold till the appeal's done. So I know that they're going to be back in session, I think, in either August or September. So depending on how the appeal goes, we could be back there then. But if not, then it'll always be next session. So maybe 2026, early 2026.
So minimum before you hear an answer, almost a year.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
we got to get you on with an update. I really want to follow the story because to me it's so important. It's something that I've said it 3 times. I deal with within my own neighborhood. Yeah. But this entire region and entire state deals with.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you having me on and let me talk about the case. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for all the info. Thanks for the good work you do. And I wish you luck. And I hope the Florida State Legislature looks into this with not only your case, but in an overarching, really meaningful way.
Yeah, that's what I hope happens too.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks, man.
Thanks.
Thanks again. All righty. Bye, everyone.